Guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co-host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode, we're going to be chatting a little bit about how to navigate summer social events.
Oh yeah, it's that time of year, baby. I don't know what week it'll be. I think it'll be like 2-3 weeks from now. So just like beginning of June, essentially, when this will be coming out. And so you'll be hot in the middle of schools getting out for kids, parties, barbecues, pools are open. This weekend, as we're recording this, Memorial Day weekend is coming up. There are college graduation already happened. So that's already done.
High school.
Yeah, but
Going
high
on.
school graduations, travel, vacations, and wedding season as well. We have a few that we're going to as well. And yeah, just a lot. Outdoor stuff, camping you wrote. So
We're going camping this weekend.
nice.
And it also made me giggle a little bit when you said weddings, because I was like, oh my God, we're not we're not in wedding season anymore. We're at kids' birthday parties and babies.
Yep.
So I'm
So
like, oh man.
all the different seasons.
Yeah.
So we have two. We only have two this summer and then one this fall. There was a year, I forget, it was maybe 2 years ago or three that we had like 8 or 9 or something. And I was like, what the heck? So a lot going on for your summer. I'm sure if you're listening to this, summer is a time where a lot of people like to take paid time off. They like to travel. The weather's nicer. I don't blame you. So with that, though, comes our temptations and social events and things that make it harder to stay on track. While these things do happen all year, the summer is typically a time where there's just more like gatherings and more good times with people. So we're going to just go over our personal strategies for how we navigate these situations and the advice that we'd impart for you both tactically and mentality wise so you can be successful with your fitness goals this summer.
Yeah, and I think that this is, if you haven't already listened to the pause button mentality, I feel like that would be a really good one to listen to prior to this, because it's kind of like, hey, yeah, we're going to have a lot of events in the summer, but that does not mean that we need to put health and fitness on pause. Because I have talked with a lot of people who are like, well, I can't because I'm going on vacation, or I can't because of XYZ. And while they make it a little bit more difficult to navigate, absolutely, that does not mean that we can't be successful with these things. So I think it's kind of like just having the right strategies in place. And then, like we kind of say with everything, it's like we want to play things by ear and learn from our mistakes. And if you go to one barbecue and things don't go very well or not according to plan, like that's okay. Like let's learn from that and let's try in another situation, like graduation party or whatever it may be. So you have opportunity to continue to improve, and you don't need to look at these as roadblocks.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is the mentality of, oh, I can't stay on track because of X, Y, and Z event. Screw it, I'll start around Monday is not something that should apply. And we should really be looking at every single one of these as an opportunity to learn. And I think really a good exercise for any event like this that we're talking about is improving our relationship with food and improving our fallback system is what I'll call it. And think of it this way, like your fallback system is, what do you fall back on when you are not in your like regular routine? What is kind of like your maintenance protocol? How do you handle food? And less so what you eat, because you'll have less control over that, but more so how much are you eating? Why are you eating? And how are you regulating that? Because those are the skills that ultimately make it a lot easier to walk away from events like that feeling satisfied, not stuffed, versus when you walk away and you're like, oh my God, I feel sick. I ate too much. I drank too much and I regret everything. And it actually taints your experience of the event. So I think I'll call that a fallback system today, and really just making sure you have that dialed in. And if you don't, these are opportunities to work on that and assess progress from event to event. Even though the events might be different, it's very qualitative. Type A people hate it. They don't like measuring things that are, intangible, of like, how did I feel after I left this event? But that's truly the gauge, because we are not going to have a food scale or calories to measure. Like we're just going to have how we felt about our choices internally and externally. And that is enough. And that is something to work on and work off of.
Yeah, because it's if you can be successful when you're at home and you're in your routine and you have your food scale and you all have all this, that's great, right? That's progress. But if you are scared of going out to eat or going to an event, like that is not. I don't know if I can really argue that that's you being successful.
Right.
So it's like, okay, we want you to look forward to these events, and then I think the really big thing is being present, right? Because like I talk with so many women who leading up to the event, I have nothing to wear, or I'm really scared about what's going to happen with food, or I know that I'm going to feel XYZ afterwards. And then the post event recovery, it's like, oh man, now I've got to restrict, now I've got to do this. And it's like, that is not a good way to live, to kind of be in this cycle of pre-event, event, post-event, and like continuing this all summer long. So hopefully this podcast will help a little bit with having those strategies and being more present and feeling like, okay, I can enjoy who I'm with, I can enjoy the food, do things in moderation and not feel like I'm going overboard.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of, at least the trends that I've noticed similar to you is like there's a lot of overthinking the before, the after, that we're almost like not even there when you're there. And then it's like all this post processing, pre processing, worry, anxiety, regret, remorse. Um, and, there's no perfect answer for how to let go and like not overthink so much. I think that's in part why coaching can be so valuable for some people, is just taking that burden off yourself, because a lot of that overthinking comes from, am I doing this right? Like, am I going to ruin my progress? Like, I'm worried about X, Y, and Z. And when you have a coach, you are basically just passing that burden off to them and saying, this is on you now. Listen, I got to do the work, but this like worry is on you. And it is
Yeah.
our job to burden that responsibility of like knowing, what is going on and what's coming next. And so sometimes the period of time that you spend working with a coach can help you to alleviate the worry, the anxiety. And then when you're done working with a coach, it's not like it comes back, because now you know what to expect. Now you know how to handle these things. So that is one avenue. Another one, I guess, would be a lot of trial and error and proving to yourself that it isn't that bad. And that's where you could use this episode to really refer back to, maybe even take some notes and like practice one thing at a time and just show yourself that like it isn't as bad as we make it out to be in our heads. And the best way to do that is to face it head on with some of the tactics that we'll give you today.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So like number one, going into this knowing like we talk about like again, tracking and doing some stuff at home, like that's practice. And then when you go to these events, like this is game time.
Yeah.
But we review game tape, right? And we kind of see what went well, what didn't go well. And just again, all of this is not like I failed or it was successful. It's like this is what I did well and this is what I can improve on next time. So I know for a fact that Marissa and I have been in this position where we have struggled at events, we have struggled at restaurants. Like we have been in your shoes and we know what it feels like. And like to be on the other side, like not to be like, cool, we're fixed. We have
Yeah.
everything taken care of, but like we know what that's like and how hard it is. Um, but I think that going into these events, kind of knowing your why, right? Like kind of having that in the back of your mind, like I want to be like feel good at this event afterwards and like having that like health and fitness is important to me. I don't want to feel like I'm either on or off or like I'm out of control, so that's important. So kind of again, we don't want to have this like super long pre-prep for these events, but I think just spending a little bit of additional time and just kind of grounding yourself a little bit with like, why is this important? Why is it important that I um, feel like I've got these things in place that are going to help me feel successful afterwards? I think that does a lot rather than just kind of like going into it blind and just showing up and like whatever happens.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it's like it's not even as much time as maybe you think. Like I think people think, oh, planning for something means I sit down for an hour and I'm like stressed out over it and all this. But I mean, our clients fill out and send a check-in form in what, 10 minutes? Like maybe. And if they write novels, like maybe 15, 20, but like it's not that long. So that's them. Like a check-in form is really them processing like how is this going to go? What are my thoughts about this? What's my plan? And a lot of times, like what
Mm-hmm.
I know what we do is we phrase questions on our check-in form to not only get the client dumping out what they're thinking, but also starting to brainstorm solutions on their own to train that pattern, right? And then we impart advice on top of that, or correct or course correct if we need to. But it's like that form takes our clients 10, 15 minutes. So for you doing this on your own, even just if you're doing nothing right now and you're going in blind, like taking 5 minutes, sitting in the parking lot of the event, sitting to yourself and saying like, what is my intention? This is really simple, actually, something that my coach sent all of his clients before Thanksgiving or some holiday. I forget what holiday it was, but he sent us all out this email before a holiday and just said like, just ask yourself like, what is your intention for this event? How do you want to feel fullness wise on a scale of 1 to 10, but by the time you leave? And what are you going to do the day leading up to the event to prep for that? And literally just spending 5 minutes to answer those questions in your own head is predetermining some outcomes rather than just going in and be like, whatever happens, happens. And then now in the event, you're thinking, how do I make that intention happen? How do I get to that 7 out of 10 instead of 10 out of 10? And you're going to make choices more in that lens, whether it be subconscious or consciously. So it could be like 2 questions that you answer. It could be really, really simple, setting those intentions.
Yeah, because like we were saying, it's like a lot of people just show up to the event and just again, it's like, well, whatever. But again, being intentional and be like, how do I want to feel? And then I think the other question too, it's like, what does a successful event kind of like look like for me? So
Mm-hmm.
like, it's like again that hungerfulness. Okay, I'm at a 6 or 7, but I'm not at that Thanksgiving 10. I need to unbutton my pants and I feel sick. That would help me feel really good. But I also don't want to be that person who avoids everything because I don't want to eat anything. I don't want to be tempted. So it's like what is going to help me feel really good walking away from this event? It's like
Yeah.
maybe I'm really present. Maybe I'm more mindful when I'm eating. Whatever that may be, or that goes such a long way rather than just showing up and whatever happens. So I love that kind of like pre-frame and kind of asking yourself those questions and doing a tiny bit of prep, but not too much prep. Um, so maybe, I don't know if we should have talked about this earlier, but kind of like why events make it harder. Like what about social events? And so I think it's really important that it's like we're typically in an environment in our context that we're not used to being in. Typically the food is a little bit different. Uh, I think a lot of times for a lot of people, the weekends, like we fall out of our routines a little bit. And so we're typically pretty structured Monday through Friday. And then the weekends, it's like, well, I don't need to wake up at the same time. I don't need to go on a walk. I don't need to get steps in. I don't need to do any meal prep, whatever it may be. And so that kind of feels like, I'm kind of in screw mode. So I might as well just continue doing whatever. But then you're also around alcohol. You're around other people who are probably pressuring you to drink alcohol as well. You're around food that you're not used to being around. So all of those things can make it tough, more tough than
Yeah.
normal.
And I'll even add, this is actually something that I don't really actually, you know what? It came to me through like my own personal experience of like, I had a really, really fun weekend the other week. And I was like, oh, I get why people who don't like their jobs like live for the weekend. Like I just had this like little
Mm.
epiphany where I was like, because I've never been the person that hated my job. So it wasn't like I was not looking forward to Monday. Like I'll have plenty of weekends where I'm like, ugh, Monday, but not to the extent of like I actually hate what I do because I love what I do. So I had that little epiphany and I realized like some of the behavior with food and alcohol can also come from a lack of tending to ourselves throughout the week.
Mm.
And then after that realization, I like brought it up with a client who had been like, she's always crushing it, but she had just a string of work stress on work stress on work stress on work stress leading right up into a vacation. And I just sat there before I replied and I was like, I think I'm going to bring this up. And I just was like, listen, I don't know if you're going to like, we're not making this a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just something that like I experienced. And if this applies at all, like I hope that making you aware of it just helps. And I was just like, I don't know if like going on vacation, following this string of high stress more than normal is going to trigger kind of like escapism-esque behavior of like I'm trying to escape my normal day to day. Like I'm free. I deserve this. I've worked so hard. I've been under so much duress that now my behavior is going to go in a complete opposite direction because it's an outlet for that stress. And so I was like, just letting you know, this is like on my mind. I don't know if this resonates at all. She actually replied and she was like, oh my God, like I used to have a mantra, work hard, play harder. And like, she was
Mm-hmm.
like, that makes a lot of sense. And that's actually a really great reminder going into this trip. So thank you. So I think a lot of times too, we have summer events and we are also socially conditioned to like look forward to summer as like an escape because we had school during the year and then summer was the time off. So a lot of times we'll channel that behavior into our food and alcohol intake and
Mm-hmm.
how we handle those events. So that's another reason why it could be really hard.
Yeah, and I had someone make a comment the other day when I was at an event like this, and everyone's drinking margaritas and like beers and something there, and they said something to me, and they're like, "God, I used to think it was really hard not being able to like drink alcohol like during the holidays for like Thanksgiving and Christmas and stuff like that." And she goes, "But it would be really tough to be pregnant in the summer and not have like beers at the pool and so it's like yeah, it's like a lot of these things are kind of like conditioned and
Yeah.
like heck yeah, I want a beer.
Yeah.
Like I'm excited. It's been 9 months. But like I also don't feel the need to like drink heavily all the time. And I always think I don't know, I think I'm just a little like I'm older now, so I don't feel like I need to have like 10, in one sitting or anything like that. Like I'm more just kind of like, yeah, just have one, enjoy it, and then I'm kind of done.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's tough. There's a lot of social conditioning and almost kind of like expectations
Yeah.
built into certain things. And I think yeah, it can be really hard, but I do see that stress and I see that a lot with clients. And so it's like these compounding events. It's like I'm stressed at work, therefore I'm going to sabotage a little bit on the weekends, but then I'm not able to reach my goals and like we dig
Yeah. Now
ourselves
I
a
feel
little bit deep.
worse.
Yeah, now I feel worse like and not cuz like all I want to do is veg and chill and not do anything cuz I'm so stressed. So, yeah, there's a lot of cycles that go into this.
Yeah. So I will say, like, just one note on that for handling summer events on the weekends. Don't only place the focus on tending to the weekend. Like, make sure that it's just in your Monday through Friday, like in your day to day, that you're doing stuff for you. Like, if that's regular exercise or like you have a day to just like rest and like actually veg on the couch during the week or just like quality time that you're able to spend, like have a midweek check in with yourself. Like, something like that could go a really long way in preventing the overcompensation effect on the weekend and just take some of the likelihood off that you might go overboard with any sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, we'll jump into strategies.
Yeah.
So my favorite is just always like bring a dish of some sort that you feel like, okay, regardless of what's there, I know that I have something that I enjoy. I have something that's maybe a little bit of a healthier option. I like to opt for like higher protein things. So I know that we're always big like buffalo chicken, high protein,
Yes.
but just having something and like for me, I usually like bringing like a salad, which is kind of silly, but like I love sitting down and seeing my plate full of like greens and fruits and it just makes me feel better about my meal
Yeah.
regardless of what I'm eating because I just feel like okay I'm getting like nutrients in and things like that um and I guess I probably should have started with like pre-event which is like please don't starve yourself
Yeah.
like please please don't like no like because again it's like oh I know that I'm going to overeat so therefore I'm not going to you're going to show up hungrier you're probably going to eat more than you normally would if you had just eaten food so pre-prep please eat throughout the day if you want to be a little bit more mindful, please don't take this to the extreme, but like you can have some higher protein breakfast, higher protein lunch, making sure you are eating fruits and vegetables throughout the day, filling up on fiber, because again, sometimes you don't know what's going to be at parties, like if it's being catered or if it's a potluck, you just don't really know. So kind of setting yourself up for success before that event, I think makes a really big difference, because I think that sometimes what happens is, again, it's like, well, I already know that I'm going to be off for this meal. So it doesn't matter what I have for lunch, and it doesn't matter what I have for dinner, and then it doesn't matter what I have the next day because I'll just start over on Monday. So just kind of staying within your routine, eating food, drinking water, that will help kind of like prime you to be in a better position come eating at these events.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think it's reasonable if you have a decent relationship with food to scale back during the day of, if you're like, okay, I do want to overindulge because like I know that grandma's bread pudding is going to be there or something, right? And it's like you can make room within reason, but not to the extent that you're actually showing up in a worse state to be able to like overeat. So
Yeah.
um you really have to kind of just practice some self-awareness there of like if you have a really horrible relationship with food and any amount of restriction is going to cause that overcompensation effect, then just don't change your normal routine. But if you're, I don't know, maybe just a little bit more of a seasoned vet, like I feel like that's something that I could do at this point where I could just like eat a little bit lighter, not really worry about it so much, and still manage myself at that meal, then I'll do that. But I think the big thing for me in those situations is that having a serving of protein right before I go. Like right before I go, especially if I've cut back on calories leading up, I know I'll be hungrier. So just like having that protein right before just kind of stunts my appetite a little bit more and keeps me a little bit fuller so that when I'm filling up my plate, I'm like, okay, I don't need to, fill my plate with my eyes. I can fill my plate with my brain. so
Yeah.
so that could be helpful as well.
Yeah.
I do love the bring in a dish one. I guess my tip next would probably just be with drinks and or just pacing in general, just the hydration priority. Like it's really easy to like always have a bottle of water in your hand, always go for a sparkling water in between drinks, and set like an intention with yourself of like how much, rather than like I'm going to cut back my drinking to this amount, think about it as I want to have as much water as I possibly can, or as many like 0-calorie liquids as I possibly can, whether that's like sparkling water, unsweetened iced tea, whatever it is. Set a goal to like really hydrate yourself and have that additive attitude towards it of like, I'm going to try to drink this much, my normal amount or more. And then you'll probably find that's just, it's hard to get that many liquids down. And so you're not able to have as many beers or liquor or wine or whatever it is that people are drinking.
Yeah. And then when it comes to alcohol, if you are going to consume, you can make smarter choices as far as like, okay, well, instead of having a like a mixed drink or whatever, it's like I have a Diet Coke and whatever, or I have, the we talk about the little Mio like things, or if you bring even like a liquid IV, or something that you can just kind of have something and make your own kind of like
It's
cocktail
a light.
in a
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, because I mean, you might, if you have 3 drinks and you do something like that, like instead of having a soda with everyone, like you can save yourself quite a bit of calories. Um, lighter beers as opposed to something heavier like an IPA or something like that. So just
Yeah.
being a little bit more like conscious of what you're drinking can save you quite a bit of calories.
Yeah. We typically bring like a case of Coke Zero cans to events like this because we just aren't sure if there's going to be diet sodas, because some people don't like diet soda. It's like, okay, that's cool. I do. And it's going to save me from, 200 calories a can of whatever. So
Hmm.
that could be really good if you are going to mix drinks, to just like bring your, you know, Minute Maid Zero or Coke Zero to the event, and then you can mix your own stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And
Yeah.
then I think you already kind of addressed like filling your plate with fruits, vegetables, salads, whatever's there. I also kind of do that too. Like I'll say like I'll fill half my plate with whatever the salad or the fruit is, And even though I don't like like you said, it just makes you feel better about your meal. I don't really
Yeah.
care to like eat a half a plate of salad, but I'll kind of like down that first to kind of again get my appetite down a little bit before I dive into the heavier stuff so I'm able to pace myself better. And that typically helps a lot too. So typically there's greens of some sort at parties, summer parties, especially summer because it's hot out. So people are trying to cool down with like a cool salad or fruit. So try to load up on that as much as you can. And then don't aim to restrict the other stuff. Just put it on your plate on the other half and really pace yourself. I think the next tip would just be mindful eating and being mindful in the choices that you're making when you're loading up. I always like to ask myself, like, what could I do without? Like, just of all this, do I need everything? Or like, what do I not need? What could I do without is a really good mantra to kind of repeat. And then mindfulness throughout the meal as well. I'll kind of ask myself the same thing as I'm eating, like, do I need the rest of this? Do I love it? Or like, could I do without it? Because I think a lot of us struggle with the idea of food waste. But
Hmm.
the reality is that I would be willing to bet that at least 95% of the people listening to this are not in a situation where food waste is actually detrimental to your situation. Like you can throw away leftovers and be okay. So I think that's another thing is like being okay with whatever you can do without, you can leave on your plate. You can toss out. You don't have to go back for seconds.
Yeah, and that's why I like the wine tasting kind of analogy when it comes to food
Yeah.
is like do a little bit here and there. Like you don't need to get piles and heaping piles because a lot of times at events, like we come a little bit hungrier, we know that we're going to eat a little bit more. But if you do smaller portions, that way you can kind of like sample everything, see what you like, not feel like you have to like, oh my gosh, I'm wasting so much food, but like you've had a little bit here and there, and then you can go back for seconds. And we talk about those like hell yeah foods where it's like if you're just kind of like, well then you don't probably don't need to go back for seconds of that. But if you have something else where you're like, damn, that was really good, then you go back for seconds. Like I think that is a better way because a lot of times like our eyes are bigger than our stomachs, so
Yeah.
we can overpile things and then we get into that like, oh, I don't want to waste food. But I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. I also look at it as like, what is a unique opportunity? So, like, food is very readily available. So, even with like the hell yeah, something might be really good. But I've also kind of layered this in because, like, there's a lot of foods that I would say are a hell yeah. So, like, that could get me into trouble alone. So I'll also ask myself, like, is this something that I could find on my own somewhere else if I wanted it again, if I wanted to go get it? Like, for example, Insomnia cookies. Like, it's a brand, it's nationwide. I could find it near me somewhere or something like it. So if somebody brought that to an event, as much as I'm like, that's a hell yes food because I love chocolate chip cookies, it's also not a unique opportunity versus like someone made something homemade that I'm probably never going to see or have again. Then I'll go back because I'm like, well, I don't know when I'll be able to have this again. So I'll kind of layer in that on top of the hell yeah food concept because I know we've covered that pretty much every holiday. We'll talk about hell yeah foods, but I found that there's a lot of hell yeah foods. A lot of food tastes good nowadays. They put a lot of butter
Yeah,
and sugar in things. So
yeah.
also layering that in helps me be a little more selective.
Yeah, so we do have a couple different episodes on like alcohol, specifically Thanksgiving, and I think a lot of those episodes talk about what we've just talked about right now. So just to kind of wrap up to talking about post event. Okay, so let's say things don't go as well as you would have hoped. So again, let's review the game tape and figure out why that was. What went wrong? What could you have done better? Is it something? Was it mindset? Did you not prepare enough mentally beforehand? Was it at the event? And kind of figure out, okay, what can I do next time that will set me up? And then please, please, please do not restrict, do not do any sort of punishment the next day as far as extra cardio or, restricting your food intake or feeling like, oh man, I was, quote unquote bad this weekend or I failed. So therefore I need to make up for it on Monday. And, because you're going to dig yourself into a really bad hole that's really, really hard to get out of, which is kind of like the binge restrict or punishment with cardio. So just kind of giving yourself that forgiveness, being like,
Yeah.
okay, things didn't go as well. Like, what can I do next time?
Yeah. And yeah, just I think seconding that. I don't know if that's a word. I second that. Wow. It's almost the end of the week, but I second that in the sense that like you gotta take it as a learning experience. You don't need to guilt or shame yourself any further than that event. What's done is done. And I think too, towards the end of the event, if we're talking weddings, like even if you do overeat, go on the dance floor. Like just go enjoy yourself. Try to move your body as much as possible. Go on a walk if it's a party or a barbecue or camping. If it's a wedding, dance your heart off. Dance the night away, right? Because that's not necessarily, I wouldn't call that overcompensating or, doing it out of guilt. It's like, just don't sit there and like eat more and drink more because you feel bad. Like just get up and
Yeah.
dance, right? And move your body. Um, and a lot of times that for me, whenever I've overeaten at weddings, like I don't feel like I overate by the time the dance floor closes down. So it does help just the energy expenditure. It also helps with digestion and reducing stress about the situation. And then you're able to kind of just get back on track too. So it's just my two
Yeah.
cents.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. So it's like, instead of changing anything, just get right back on track, get into your normal routine, like, meal prep, whatever that may be, whatever that looks like, just go ahead and do that, because that will help a lot. Just kind of like letting those negative feelings go rather than like keeping them into the week and feeling like, oh, I was bad, so therefore I need to do XYZ. It's like, just let it go, move on, and next event you'll have another opportunity to figure out like what's going to work best for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I just like to think of it as like what actually helps you moving forward. Does beating yourself up more on purpose actually help? No. Oftentimes we think that it does, but it really does set us back. So
Yeah.
taking that forward thinking mindset.
Yeah. And focus on the positives. What did go well,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Pull a win
oh,
out.
yeah. So like maybe I normally get blackout drunk and I only had 3 drinks. Like, what? It's like, cool. That is literally a win. It may
Yeah.
not feel like it, but it's those little tiny things, and it's like that is momentum, and that will carry you forward, and you can continue to improve.
Yeah.
So yeah. So hopefully you guys found this episode helpful. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and do that. You can find us on Instagram. You can find me at Christy Lynn Fit. Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you back next week.